All right. Cool. Let's kick off with karakia. I want to do a special one, which Pine Campbell wrote. Nā Pine Campbell tēnei karakia I tito. He is our kaiarahi based in Tokomaru Bay. So he wrote this for our He Mana Tō Te Kai series, which a few of you jumped in on that series as well. Nō reira, me timata tātou. Nā io matua ko rangi nui rawa ko papa tuanuku, nā rāua a tāne mahuta, a tangaroa, a tāwhiri mātia me era atu. Nā rātou ko hine ahuone, nāna ka puta te ira tangata ki te whai au ki te ao mārama, whiti ora kia rangi e tuiho nei, whiti ora kia papa e takoto ake nei, ti hei mauri ora ki te tai au e whakātu mai nei, hei ako, hei tohu, hei manaki, whakamaua kia ita, kia tina, kia toa, hui e! Hi. Mauri ora tātou. If you're coming here with a little bit of stress, a little bit of today's worries, I invite you to just shake them out right now and allow yourself to come fully into this space. This is not really a super stressful academic space. This is a place for us to really be ourselves, wānanga, and collectively decide that we want to boost kai resilience for our whānau and our communities. We're all feeling the pinch in the pocket, I think, from the supermarkets at the moment. So this is just one of the tools in our kete that we can arm ourselves with so that we can feel confident that we have the ability to grow kai, to preserve kai, to share kai amongst ourselves and to feed ourselves. Ne? So that's really the core purpose of these wānanga, and to remind ourselves that kai has whakapapa, kai has mana, kai doesn't belong in the landfill. So that's a really quick, brief intro into today's wānanga, and I've already introduced myself, so I'd like to hand over to Shirley and then Matt to introduce themselves. Tēnā kōrua.
Tēnā tātou katoa. He mihi ki a koe Arohanui nau tuwhiri tō tātou hui. He pai kiti kiti a koutou e hono mai ana tēnei ata. He uri tēnei o te raukoa o te iwi o raukawa ki te kaukaro pātitiri, ngā te huri te hapu ko pikitu kei te wātu te marae. He uri hoki no ngā puhi ko manga muka te marae. Ahako tērā, e noho ana mata ko aku tama me tōku pāpa ki raro i te maru o ngā iwi katoa o raukoa ki te tonga kei o taki nei. Nō reira, he pai ki te kitea koutou, hika kakatoa ki tēnei wānanga. Tēnā tātou. Lovely to see you all. Really looking forward to sharing some kōrero today. And I see already somebody's popped a question or a kōrero in the messages. So look forward as much as we can in this sort of webinar style to hearing from you as well with your pātai. Tēnā tātou.
Ngā mihi Arohanui and Shirley for opening us in a beautiful way. Ko putua ki toku manga, ko rangi tai ki toku awa, ko ngā tewa toku iwi, ko ngā tamura toku hapu, ko te teko toku kāinga, Texas represent, anyone in the building. Kia ora, yeah. Ko me Perymana ho. Yeah, so I'm from Texas, but I'm actually living in Tamaki, have lived here most of my life. But yeah, I'm an academic researcher, whatever you want to call it, but actually I work in parakore plastic pollution kind of space. Also want to mihi to Tony in the room supporting us, Tautoko. Yeah, we'll be talking about our first learning by preserving kai, which will be so cool, and then Shirley will give us a demonstration. But should I pass back to you, Arohanui, or should we jump into it?
I think let's jump into it. We've got a few people who have just joined in, so just a reminder to please mute yourself so that we're not hearing any background noises while we go through this learning module. But obviously feel free to unmute if you have any pātai and jump in the chat, and we'll monitor that as we go through. Kia ora, Matt, let's kick off.
Cool. I'll just share my screen. You guys let me know if that's showing up all good. Cool. How's that?
Looks good, Matt.
Cool. Okay, sweet. Yeah, so we're going to be going through our first learning bite, which is like a online learning module, which should only take about 10-15 minutes each time. You can actually do it with your own whānau and your own whare at your own pace in your own time. But today we'll go through it together in this webinar because it's our first one. We want it to be interactive. So there'll be a couple of pātai, a few prompts, and please share your thoughts and knowledge in the chat because I'm sure that there's some stuff we can learn from you guys as well. And yeah, mihi to you all for coming. Thank you. So yeah, kia ora tātou. Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei wānanga. Kia ora and welcome to our first learning bite, topic of preserving kai. And preserving kai is a practical way for us to build whānau resilience and keep our kai edible beyond their harvest seasons. And this learning bite will look at preserving kai through te ao Māori. So connecting traditional knowledge with everyday modern practices. And this will include looking at drying, smoking, freezing, pickling, and bottling, and a number of other different methods that you'll be able to try in your own home to try and preserve kai. Yeah, and as Arohanui said, if there's let us know where you're coming in from in the chat. So this is just some instructions for if you're doing it at home. This is how to use this program. We don't really need to do it now because we're all together doing it together. So let's talk about why we preserve kai and why it's important to preserve kai. And preserving kai that is not immediately being eaten helps to prevent and reduce kai waste, which is super important because kai is a taonga that we share whakapapa with, as Arohanui mentioned before, so we must honour it. But also, when kai goes to landfill, it severs those whakapapa connections and we forget about them. But also, the rotting food creates methane gases that contribute to global warming. So preventing kai from becoming waste is climate action, and it's also an act of kai tiakitanga. Preserved kai also comes in handy during difficult times, such as cold months and poor harvest seasons, and is helpful when more kai is needed during gatherings such as hui and tangihanga. So is anyone already preserving any kai right now? This is a question you can write your answer in the chat. Anything in your pantry, anything in your fridge, we would love to hear. And we can have a corridor about that later, but let's just let that stew for a minute. Anything you guys are preserving, please put in the chat. Traditional kai preservation methods that we had in previous times, but also today, a lot of us still practice these things. Māori have developed really highly effective systems actually to preserve kai, using the air, sun, smoke, fat, water, earth, and salt. Some common methods include whakamaruki, air drying fish, birds, and fruit, pāwhara, smoking tuna and fish, rua kumara, which are underground storage pits usually for kumara, huahua, which is storing birds and kai in their own fat, kōpiro, which is fermenting kai, such as corn, and pātaka kai, which is storing kai in raised structures. These methods help to make kai last longer and protect it from pests, and also help to maintain its nutritional value. And you can see a picture here from Te Aro of a eel drying tuna drying rack from way back in the day. It's really cool to see these practices that our tipanora are doing.
And just something on that as well, Matt. What I really love about learning about these processes is that our tupuna were real experts at trial and error as well. So these methods were really developed over time. You know, they weren't perfect. They made mistakes and realized, oh, you know, we need to have a draining hole in the rua kumara or things like this. You know, they were perfected over time. And obviously allowed us to eat nutritional kai throughout months where we, you know, the winter months where we didn't have as much access to kind of fresh fruit and that sort of things. And obviously we had to become really good at this process when we traveled across the Pacific. We needed to be able to store kai on our waka for that journey.
Aye, and this mātauranga is constantly a work in progress. Like we're constantly learning every generation how to do different things and improve our ways. So we learn from our tipuna and make new systems for our mokopuna. Moving on from the rua kumara, there's actually a term that you're probably familiar with, a lot of you guys, is root cellaring, which is one of the oldest and most sustainable ways to preserve kai that uses the natural insulating properties of the earth to keep food cool, dark, and stable. So it's an alternative to keep kai cool that doesn't require electricity. So don't need a freezer, don't need a fridge, but you can keep your kai cool. And yeah, the rua kumara are an example of root cellaring in Te Ao Māori. And for us, storing kai underground reflects a deep understanding of the whenua and seasonal cycles, particularly in relation to kumara and other taonga crops that we have. And these are always carefully constructed to manage the airflow and moisture and temperature. So there was a lot of mātauranga feeding into these systems that we had, and we paid so much attention to the taiao and how it interacted with our kai, how we could make sure we got the most out of our kai.
I don't know if any of you are on the Māori Gardeners page on Facebook, but I assume quite a few of you probably are. And I remember seeing that someone has made their own rau kumara pit at their house. And also remembering that, you know, electricity is expensive as well. So for some whānau to keep a big chest freezer running, you know, is really can get pricey. So thinking of these as alternatives to that as well. So how can we apply this mātauranga in a modern day context? Sorry, Matt, just want to flesh out some of our kōrero a little bit.
That's awesome. Please keep going. On this slide, we're just looking at a few of the different methods for preserving kai that we're talking about today. So of course, we're talking about pickling, but there's also smoking, which a lot of you have probably tried, bottling and canning, freezing, and drying and dehydrating. So first of all, we'll be talking about pickling, which goes hand in hand with salting and brining. And these methods use salt and an acidic liquid such as vinegar to prevent bacterial growth in the kai that we're trying to preserve, which helps to extend the shelf life of it, but also changes the texture and flavor, often for the better, makes it really tasty and can be really good for our gut. The salt element helps to remove the moisture and stop spoilage of the kai, while the vinegar creates an acidic environment. And some examples of this would include pickled onions, cucumber, and puha. I won't go into too much depth because Shirley will be covering a lot of this later, but if you want to take a screenshot now, this is your chance to get the kamokamo pickle recipe. We'll also share it after, of course, but take a screenshot now, take a picture, because it's a real simple, easy recipe. And we've got some beautiful photos from Shirley last night in here too. And yeah, try this out at home. If you don't have kamokamo, you can also try zucchini. And it's all about experimenting. Try it out with different spices, different vinegars, whatever works for you, whatever you've got. But yeah, we'll talk about this a little later. So if you've got your screenshot, I'll move on. Yeah, this is smoking kai. So this is one that a lot of us are probably familiar with. It's pretty common in Te Ao Māori. And this preserves kai by drying it out. And also it adds antimicrobial compounds from the smoke, which is something that I learned quite recently. So that helps to reduce the bacteria in the kai and keep it safe for eating and storing for later. It also enhances the flavor and texture. A lot of us prefer smoked fish to raw fish, and some of us, yeah. So traditionally, smoking is used for tuna, kahawai, and other fish. It also requires careful control of the heat, airflow, and timekeeping for the best results.
Can I ask a pātai here, please, Matt?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, this is, I guess, sparked my interest because someone dropped off a few chunks of yellowfin tuna to my whare the other day. And I was like, I don't know what to do with it. Has anyone on this Zoom smoked tuna? And if so, should I slice it? Should I leave it in chunks? Because I have a smoker. Just wondering what I can do to not waste that taonga. Kia ora.
Shirley, I feel like you might have something. Do you have something to say here, Shirley?
Yeah, kia ora. I don't have a huge amount of experience with smoking tuna, well, fish as such, but more with drying fruit and veggies. So one of the things I know from that experience is sort of making sure that the pieces of whatever it might be, in your case tuna, are the similar size. So, you know, if you have some that are thick and some that are small, then they're not going to smoke or sort of cook or preserve all the way through at the same rate. So that might be one tip I share. But there might be somebody else on who has more experience with smoking than me. Could throw it out to the whānau.
Yeah, open floor whānau. If anyone knows, please jump in.
Or if you'd prefer, if you're a bit shy and you'd rather jump in the chat, that's okay too. But this is great. This is us all learning together.
Oh yeah, Sky in the chat says that their dad smoked tuna and like steaks with thick bits. I've seen it done in strips as well, the long strips hanging over like a smoking device. But I like the idea of steaks too. That sounds yum.
One really cool thing that I'm thinking about is we did a wānanga last year with Chef Joe McLeod, which some of you will be familiar with, a really renowned Māori chef. And he was telling me about how hui, you know, obviously hui were used as our water bottles, essentially. And I'm growing hui for the first time this season, which has been a big learning process. But also they were obviously dried out. And then there was a process where you could strengthen the hui because hui can be quite delicate and can break. So he talked about strengthening the hui in like hot sand. So if you bury the hui in really hot sand, you could light a fire or whatever, then you could strengthen the hui, and then they would actually preserve kai inside of the hui, And he talked about fish and things like that, that they would kind of sit in a brine, and often our brine would be using the fat or the hinu of our manu. And so we would preserve meat in the hinu of the manu, and then we would put that in the hue. Just something interesting that I learned from Chef Joe McLeod that might be of interest to you all.
Awesome. And I see that Esther also put in the chat that tuna is nice smoked, but the best parts are the puku and the wings. So that's a good tip to watch out for. Maybe if anyone's got any more whakaaro on how to smoke tuna, please put that in the chat. But otherwise, maybe we'll just keep on going. Cool. Our next one also goes hand in hand with the topic of today, so bottling and canning. It's often what you want to do when you've made some pickles. And this will help seal the kai in a sterile environment, which is ideal for like long-term storage, especially during the colder months. So when you go into winter, you want to prepare and have lots of kai in your cupboards. Bottling and canning is what you should be up to. So this supports food security and reduces reliance on store-bought kai, which is great because we don't want to be reliant on the global supermarkets and all of that. We want to be eating kai Māori and healthy kai for us. It's also really important to keep on top of our hygiene and cleanliness when we're doing bottling and canning, because bacterial growth can really ruin the kai that you're trying to preserve. So if you're you have to be really careful with hygiene. But you should definitely try it at home, because fruit, sauces, and preserves are really easy to can, and they last really well. So try it at home if you've got any fruit or anything that you could try to turn into a sauce or preserve.
A really good one for this is feijoas. It's feijoa season is fast approaching us, and I think like most of us, there's just an excess of feijoas during that time. Everyone's trying to get rid of them, trying to give them away. So there's lots of really fun things you can do with feijoa. Shirley was talking about feijoa wine just before everyone came in, but there's also, you can obviously bottle them, and feijoa fizzy and kombucha and all of these things. So yeah, just coming up with creative ways to not waste the kai that we grow.
Our next technique is freezing kai, which is something you guys are probably familiar with. Most of us have like a freezer or a fridge. And this also helps to slow bacterial growth. This is a running theme in all these preservation methods, is how do we slow the bacterial growth or stop it from happening so that our kai doesn't go off. And yeah, this is also, freezing kai helps us to manage excess harvest. So when we have a lot of kai coming from the mara, then you don't want it to go to waste, you don't want it to rot on the shelves or in the pantry, you can freeze it. So that also prevents kai waste. And a lot of kai, some kai is better to freeze than others. So especially kai with a lower water content will freeze better. So things like peas, corn, herbs, and berries, where things that are less suitable are things with kai with higher water content. So like lettuce and cucumber. And there's just some photos here of a few things that you can and can't freeze, and it's a little bit of a guessing game.
Sorry, I keep jumping in at every
No,
one, but
awesome.
it's because there's so much more we can add to all of these slides as well. I replanted my whole front lawn. I've only been in my place for 6 months, and the first thing we did was dig up the front lawn and plant it all into potatoes. And so we've got heaps of potatoes, more than we can even share with our whānau. And so we're in the process of harvesting those. And I got it as a tip off the Māori Gardeners Facebook page. But I'm going to slice them and freeze them. And then you can just pull them out and boil them or make them into chips or whatever. But that's a way of keeping your potatoes. And also I've got a whole bunch of spinach that I'm going to freeze for stir fries and things. So yeah, just something to think about. But also it's a great way to give excess kai away to your community.
Yeah, it's also like you can experiment with this stuff, and if you blanch certain vegetables, they actually freeze a lot better. So if you do some experimenting in your home, you can figure out different things that you didn't know could be frozen. If you just blanch it a little bit, boil it, yeah, do some experimenting. Here we've got a little activity, so I'll ask you guys this partai, and I'll click on the true or false. What do you guys reckon? Can we freeze fresh kumara? True or false? Put it in the chat or jump on the voice if you want, on the mic.
Definitely can freeze it.
Most people saying true, yeah. Let's click true. Oh. So it actually looks like it's false. And I'm going to pass over to Tony to talk a little bit more about this one, because I didn't know this, and I thought you could just freeze kumara, but it turns out there's a little bit more to know. So Tony, could you give us a bit of whakaaro there, please?
Kia ora koutou. Well, I think like Arohanui said, Matt, you know, it's all trial and error. So in kumara and it's worked. Awesome. Haere tonu. Yeah. So I think, you know, like lots of things, there's never a wrong or right answer, eh? It's trial and error and, you know, getting it to how you like it and how you want to enjoy it. So, kia koe. Kia ora, Matt.
I mean, yeah, and that's the other thing too. This isn't like a you can't do this or you can do this. And I think I looked this up after you told me, and I think with kumara, if you blanch it, it does tend to freeze better. So that might be the technique to make it work. So our next question, our next pātai, can herbs be frozen in oil? What do you guys reckon? True or false? Yes or no? Got some yeses and some thumbs up. Let's try that one. Yeah, correct. And that's something I think we should do a wānanga on, because that would be really interesting for us to talk about in terms of not just kai, but also rongoa. There's so much we can go into with that. And our last pātai, most fruits can be frozen. True or false? Thumbs up? Couple of people? True, aye. Aye, cool. Yeah, and this is something a lot of us kind of forget. Like you keep the fruit on your pantry or your bench, whatever it is. But actually, we can be freezing this stuff, and then it's actually just as good, often a bit more tasty, and you're making smoothies or something, it makes it more flavorful. Cool. So one thing that you could preserve by freezing is, you guys type this one in the chat. Let us know what you could be freezing that you might already have in your own home or in your mata, in your kitchen maybe. And another pātai is, how can we keep kai cool without a freezer or electricity? There's two pātai here for us to answer in the chat. Awesome, Angela, have a freezer full. Plums, tomatoes, blackberries, beans. Awesome, there's so many things, eh, guys? And who remembers how we could keep kai cool without a freezer or electricity? Anyone want to try answer that one? Yeah, Sky, ground storage, like root celery or rokumura. Awesome. Nice. Kalpai, thanks, guys. Next one we'll talk about is drying and dehydrating, which is really nice. This is a great way to make snacks when you've got lots of things that you want to be drying out from the mata. So drying and dehydrating removes the moisture so bacteria cannot grow, like pretty much all of these methods. The dry kai is lightweight, long-lasting, and nutrient-dense. Traditional drying methods relied on the sun, wind, timekeeping, and local weather knowledge, whereas modern dehydrators offer consistency and reliable food safety. Common foods to dry would be vegetables, so things like kumara, fruits like apple, banana, can do really most fruits, herbs such as kawa and rosemary, and meat such as fish, chicken, and pork. That actually brings us to the end of this first part of the webinar. So what did we learn today? Anyone want to chuck in the chat what they learned today, their key takeaways from this first part of the wānanga? What was standing out for you guys, and what's something that we could deep dive a little bit more? Feel free to jump on the mic too if you have anything you want to quote it all.
And we've got a lot of people with a lot of mātauranga on this call who are food experts in their own right. So if you think that this, remember that this learning bite is specifically about preserving. So if you think there's anything missing in here, let us know as well, and we can update it and improve it as we go along. This is our first time showcasing this learning bite, but there are other learning bites that relate to other topics under the umbrella of Kai. So yeah, kia ora tātou. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to chuck them in the chat. Otherwise, we might stop screen sharing this now, Matt, and we might get over to Shirley to give us a demonstration.
Right, thank you, guys.
Are you ready for us, Shirley? Rawe. So Shirley is going to share with us some kamokamo pickle today. Tēnā koe, Shirley.
Kia ora tātou, and thank you for that Learning Bites experience. That was really fascinating, and also fascinating seeing all the comments in the chat. I learned a few things from them as well, and also just acknowledging that it sounds like we've got some a fair range of experience in the rōpū today. So Hopefully this is helpful and it can add to it. And like I mentioned earlier, also keen to hear your tips and tricks as well. I guess there's a bit of a background and whakapapa to my own, I was going to say interest, but it's actually a bit of an obsession with preserving kai. My grandparents were great preservers of kai, and they had a big pantry lined with the AG jars and a big mara, and they preserved, they made jams every year, preserved fruit and so on. So I think it was sort of embedded in me from that experience growing up. So for me, I really like, as Arohanui has mentioned, I really like the experimental of it. It brings out the hautatu in me. You can give it a go. If it doesn't work, you learn from it and so on. So I really like that aspect of it. But, all the other things that have been mentioned too, so you don't waste your kai, so you're reusing things. We reuse jars again and again and again in this whare. I find it really wasteful that we, can use a jar and then you pop it out to the recycling, it's smashed down, melted down and made into another jar. It makes like no sense to me. So I have a bit of an obsession with the jars as well, which I'm trying to curb. But anyway, some things are a work in progress.
As you can see by her beautiful shelf behind her that is lined with all this goodness and preserved kai.
That's like a fraction. We moved house about a year and a half ago, and I had to empty out and to all my boxes and boxes of jars. But they have a place. They're really useful. So we'll look at that. But what I thought I'd share with you today is it's a recipe for kamokamo pickle, but it's kind of like a baseline recipe for any kind of pickle, really. It's one that has been tried and tested in our whare over the years, so it's really basic, which is good. And it can be altered for any other fruit or vegetable. Yeah, and I think what I've found is once you know the basics of anything, then you can mix and match it and get creative with that basic recipe and the basic strategies for bottling. So I'm hoping this works because my laptop's balanced on a stack of books, but I'm going to try and tilt it over here so we can see the workbench, which I think you can. Oh, so the recipe, and you might have seen on the screen earlier, the recipe itself is really, really simple. And to me, it's about ratios. So a good ratio I find is about 4 cups of chopped kamokamo, 1 cup of chopped onions, any type of onions. I really like red because I like the color they produce, but any kind of onions, 1 cup of sugar, and 1 cup of vinegar. So that's your baseline recipe. So it's got 4 things in it, 4 cups of kamokamo, 1 cup of onions, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of vinegar. And that's kind of the core of the recipe. So I was chopping last night and just now. These are some fantastic kamokamo that were gifted to us from a friend of ours in Te Puke. I'm not sure if she's online. That's a bit of a shout out to Ngā Waiata. So I've got here chopped up kamokamo. There's 4 cups. And it's quite interesting actually because a small kamokamo like that will make about 2 cups of chopped up kamokamo. Yeah. That's 4 cups. Approximately 1 cup of onion, and it's really just not much more than 1 onion. Sort of this size. So sort of 2 of these, 1 of those is your baseline recipe. But in the reality, quantities don't matter too much, I find. It doesn't have to be precise. And you'll get a slightly different result each time, but it really doesn't matter. So kamokamo, onions, sugar, it's just a cup of white sugar.
We've got a question in the chat. Shirley asking, do we need to use sugar?
That's a good question. And I've tried different things, mostly jam without sugar. And some years ago, I kept bees for some years and I tried to swap it out with honey, which does work. But then I was like, oh my gosh, the honey's such a taonga. It was I was scared of the risk of, you know, burning it and wrecking a whole batch and including that honey. So, I mean, I think you could try it, and it would be kind of like preserved, you know, in the same way that you have gherkins. So it would be less like a relish or a chutney or a pickle, and more like pickled kamokamo, if that makes sense. So I would say yes, but you'd get a different result. So this is a recipe for, and to be honest, I don't know the difference between a pickle, a relish, and a chutney. If somebody knows the difference between those things, to me they're kind of all variations of the same thing. So this is for a relish. So the short answer is I would say yes, but you're kind of making a different thing, which is also okay. Yeah. And I know you know, some of us need to be cautious, well, probably all of us need to be cautious about sugar. So that's a really good partai. Yeah. But to get for this as a pickle or a relish, you want that sort of jammy consistency, you know, it sort of slightly gels. And for that, you need the sugar. Yeah. Oh, there's a answer to my pickles tend to have no sugar. Okay, so probably what I'm making here is a kamokamo relish. Relishes and chutneys have lots. Ka pai. Kia ora, thank you. So we've got our 4 cups of kamokamo, 1 cup of onion, 1 cup of sugar, and I don't know if any of you are online. We're also part of our apple cider vinegar wānanga last year that we made online along with Moko Morris. But this is one of those nice full circle things. There's some of the apple cider vinegar that we made last year that I'll use in this batch here. So 1 cup, which is probably about that amount, 1 cup of vinegar. And again, you can use any vinegar. And you know, vinegars have different strengths. So if you're using, say, a malt vinegar and you don't want it too strong, just water it down. It's really as simple as that. I like the flavor of apple cider vinegar, but it's not hugely kawa. Yeah. So that's the baseline, and then you can kind of throw in other things. So depending on what your taste preferences are. So had a rummage in our mara for other things that could be used. Garlic, you know, crush up some garlic. I don't know, a few cloves, kaiakwe, chilies, the fantastic chili is a half. Another thing I really like to add is kawa. So that's just some sliced up kawa. I kind of add it to most things, and I like not only the flavor, not only the fact that it's abundant in our mara, but also it's like a tupuna kai. So you're adding in, you have that whakapapa connection to this. You know, it's a native species to Aotearoa, but it's one of our tupuna kai and our rongoa, as is all our kai. So, but I like that aspect of adding it into our kamokamo relish. You see, I've just renamed it. In terms of kawa, another way that we use it here, these are the little, I'm not sure what they're called actually, but are kind of like seed pods when they germinate. So we collect them when they come out, sort of dry them on the windowsill, and you can grind them up, and they're basically like a pepper with that kawa taste in it, and I find that's fantastic to add as well. But whatever herbs you might have in the mara, kaiakwe, and just adding, you know, a spoon of this, a spoon of that in terms of garlic, chili, whatever. It's not really going to change the consistency and so on very much, or the cooking process. So you can go for it. So again, how much kawa do you add? So, you know, that's, I don't know, that's maybe 2 spoonfuls chopped up. I might add about that much. But again, if you really like kawa, add some more. Yeah. Trying to see another partai. Somebody's put some definitions down of relish or chutney. Fantastic. So I don't know if there are any other partai about that bit before I move on to, I've got on the stove behind me a batch that I've had cooking just this morning. So the next part of the sort of demonstration is I'll show once it's cooked how to bottle it up. Does that sound kei te pai Arohanui? Yeah, so I'm going to clear this a little bit. One of my big tips is around sterilizing jars, and there are lots of ways of sterilizing jars. As I say, we reuse our jam jars. The way that I find really effective is you bung them in the oven. I'm going to turn towards our oven. I think you can see oven. Yeah. Okay, hold on. So, just a basic jam jar. Empty, clean, dry. Put them in the oven when the oven's cold. Then I'll turn the oven on to 100. Let it heat up. And if you have it, the jars in there on 100 for at least half an hour, then they're sterilized. So big tips there is to put the jars in when the oven's cold. If you put it in a hot oven, you run the risk of cracking it. So it's going to heat up slowly. But half an hour at 100 degrees Celsius, then they're effectively sterilized. Also hot. So I was saying to Arohanui earlier, I literally always burn myself when doing it. So any tips around not burning yourself are most welcome. The other strategy for sterilizing jars is if you have a dishwasher, if you put them in the dishwasher, run them on a cycle, the moment the cycle's done, they're effectively sterilized because the dishwasher goes up to 100 degrees Celsius as well. And we do have a dishwasher. The thing I find doesn't quite work with the dishwasher is if you work with hot jars, then the sterilization process is a little bit more guaranteed. And the dishwasher, I find they can cool down, unless you get your timing perfect, they can cool down before you're spooning it all in. That makes sense. So these jars can just sit there in the oven until I'm ready to do the spooning into the jars step. Yeah. So those are my two strategies. Kia ora.
Roha mai. I just thought a really good way to minimize the risk of burning yourself is to get a really big oven dish and put the jars inside the oven dish and into the oven. So then you can just use oven mitts to grab out the dish. You might not be able to fit as many jars in, but I find that technique works easier for me because my oven's low and I have to bend down. I don't want to keep bending down and grabbing hot things. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora. Kia ora. Fantastic idea. It's funny because I do have fancy gadgets, like you get this pinchy thing that you can hold the jars with, but I've found it hard. So I just use towels, my oven mitt, and still manage to burn myself a lot, but that's okay. So that's my tip for sterilizing. What I'll do, and again, I hope we get a good visual. I'm going to bring our hot pot over there and spoon it up. Oh, so I missed a crucial bit. Once you've got your mixture, your kamokamo onions and all the stuff to add all that flavor, bit of salt. You don't actually need a huge amount because we're not preserving with salt, but the salt's there just to bring out a bit of flavor. And again, I know a lot of us need to take care with the level of salt. So to be honest, I often make it without salt. Then we want to bring it to the boil and then simmer it. And, you know, a lot of recipes talk about a rolling boil. So a nice sort of medium level heat to keep the boil going. And this mixture here is probably boiled this morning for about an hour. Yeah. And again, I'm hoping you can see it. So it's that color and consistency, still a bit runny. I did put a bit of water in it, but you don't need to. I put a bit of water because I was boiling it a bit longer than I might usually have because of multitasking, but there you go. So, and I've tasted it and it's quite sweet in flavor. So yeah, definitely a relish rather than a pickle, according to our new definition. So for spooning it up, and this is the tricky bit, what I find, because you want to get it, you want your mixture to be hot and you want the jar to be hot as possible. And you also want to get it into the jar really without spilling any on the edge, because what your jar will do when you come to put the lid on, when you've filled and put the lid on, it'll form a seal between the jar, and you know jars have that sort of rubbery bit in there. So that rubbery bit on the lid will form a seal with the lip of the jar. So you can imagine if you've spilled some of your relish on there, it can, you know, interrupt the seal, if you like, and not seal properly, and then it compromises your sterilized kamokamo relish. So this is the tricky bit, getting it from here into here without spilling it. But it doesn't matter, because I have two strategies. One is one of my favorite gadgets in the house is a, what do you call that, a funnel. And I've got 3 funnels of 3 different sizes for pickling, and they're fantastic. So most things for pickling, you can just use effectively what you've got in the house. You know, it doesn't have to be a fancy preserving pot. You can just use your boil-up pot or your pasta pot, whatever you usually cook in. And all the other utensils you probably already have, you know, wooden spoon, serving spoon, etc. But this is one I literally went out and purchased, so not easy to find in op shops if they're stainless steel. So that's my top tip. If you're going to purchase anything, it would be a funnel. So funneling in, just seeing it. Yeah. This mixture is not very liquidy. If you want something a bit more liquidy, you can add water in the cooking process. That's good. So my jar and the mixture has cooled down a bit, but I would normally be doing this at the stove with everything as hot as possible. I've overfilled it. Spoon, hook it down. And you might be able to see
that I might read you while you do that, Shirley.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one question is, with the added sugar, is it still good for your puku?
In terms of gut health, is that the question?
I'll wait to respond.
That's a good question, because in terms of gut health, we do need to take care of sugar. In terms of other, you know, there are a lot of other conditions where we need to take care of our sugar. The apple cider vinegar, you probably know, is good for your puku, so you're still going to get those benefits. I'm hoping that answered the question.
Someone said, why does the jar and pickle need to be hot?
Again, it's a sterilization process. So we'll fill this up. I'll show you in a minute. So I find what works well is if you've got about 1 centimeter of a gap at the top there, you can see it's kind of liquidy, and often it's a good idea if there's bubbles in there, just use something long and pointy. I've just got a chopstick here. You can use a sharp knife, whatever, to poke down and release some of those bubbles, and that helps the sealing process, because what you're going to end up doing is creating a bit of a vacuum, and that 1 centimeter gap at the top of your mixture, between that and the lid, you're going to create a bit of a vacuum. So I just dirtied the rim. I'm going to show you my other strategy. So if you do get kai on the rim, no panic. I normally have a cloth handy, dip it in hot water and just give it a wipe. Easy as. So that's if you haven't rushed out and purchased a stainless steel funnel. So everything's hot, the mixture's hot, the jar's still hot, and we seal quickly straight away and leave it on the bench. Usually I'll lay out a tea towel, sit them all there to cool so they don't melt or stick to the bench. And what happens after this, ideally, is after a little while, as your mixture's cooling down, you'll hear a pop. And that's I don't know if you hear that. That's me doing it, obviously. But the pop that you hear, like just one, when it cools down, and you can imagine the air and the mixture inside is cooling down and shrinking a bit, then it creates a bit of a suction on the lid, and that's that kind of vacuum effect that I mentioned earlier. So to get that, you want everything as hot as possible. You want it filled up to about that much of a gap from the top. You want as little air bubbles down here as possible, because you want just the air sitting up there. And then you sit there, wait for it to cool a bit. If you hear the pop, then your sterilization process and your preserving process is pretty much guaranteed. Yeah. So I find if some of mine don't pop, and that'll happen if you get to the end of your pot of stuff and your mixture's not so warm anymore. So I've made it up that it's, you know, not as warm as it, or as hot as it could be. If they don't pop, those are the jars I'll use first, because they're the ones that you might have a risk of getting some mold on the top. Although if you do get mold, I just scrape it off and eat it anyway, but not great for gifts if you're going to koha your kamokamo relish to somebody else.
Sarah has asked if you do the water bath method.
Yeah, I have done that a few times. I don't do it as a habit. So the water bath method, my understanding is you can bottle it up like that, put it in your water bath, and it heats the whole thing up, and it creates that, again, when it cools down again, it creates that sort of suction process to sterilize it. I'd be keen to hear from anyone else who's more practiced with.
So Henny has said if hers don't pop, she uses the water bath process.
I see. Gotcha.
And there was other questions about like, why do you do that? And I just want to reiterate the point that Shirley's already made, but the sterilization process is really important. Otherwise you can get sick if you don't bottle your food properly. So that is why it's really important to use sterile jars. And that's another reason why they fill it right to the top and then close the lid and then allow for that pop to happen, so you know it's sealed properly.
Yeah, kia ora. And what I'll usually do is have a pot of boiling water on the stove, sterilize everything in that boiling water like this. That's why I prefer a stainless steel rather than a plastic. This, you know, all the utensils you're going to use, even the scraper, which is, you know, that's silicone, so it can go in hot water. So all those things, sterilize them before we start. Is good practice.
In case people are wondering, because it's in the chat, where do you buy those stainless funnels from? Someone said they've seen them at Mitre 10. Someone said they're at Dave's Emporium. I think we all have an emporium in our region that you can think of where you might want to check out. And someone also said that they store their jars on wood, like even a wooden chopping board, because then the jars don't crack. So I'm assuming you don't. Do you store these in the fridge, or is it better to just store them outside like the shelf you've got behind you?
The full jars, once they're like that? Yeah, just on the shelf behind you, so they don't need to be in the fridge at all. Once they're open and you start using them, store them in the fridge then. Our fridge is literally full of half-used jars of a whole lot of different things. So we never have fridge space or freezer space. Yeah, and I think I got this from one of the sort of more fancy, out of the ordinary shops, like I don't know, a kitchen shop, one of those kitchen shops. But yeah, Tautoko Mitre 10, they have a lot of preserving stuff. They have the AG jars and lids and so on. There might be some online sources too.
And we've got another question. How long after canning can you eat the pickle?
Oh, I can eat it straight away. Like, I could literally eat it now. Yeah.
And how long
you'll find once it cools.
How long does it last for?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, years. And I use my sense of smell a lot. So, you know, you're smelling it as you're cooking it. You know what a fresh smell smells like. If I've got a jar that's been sitting on the shelf for years and I'm not sure if it's okay, you take the lid off, check for mold growth, but give it a smell, and then, you know, I find that a good indicator. But in terms of how long pickles and that last, I've got a jar, I mean, it's marmalade. I've got a jar of marmalade from my granddad that's been sitting in my cupboard for at least 16 years. So as old as my oldest son is. Yeah. And, you know, I'm sure it's okay. I haven't opened it yet. But yeah, I mean, that makes me think of, like, one of the other reasons I like to bottle is the kōrero that comes with the bottling process, kind of like the pūrākau. So in that jar of marmalade, you know, you draw on all your memories of your granddad or whoever it might be. I mentioned earlier that a good whenua waiata gave us these kamokamo. So you capture that element of connection and friendship in the jar. I remember a couple of years ago at our marae we had a hui, and at the end of the hui there were all these chopped veggies and leftover feijoas. It was at that time left over, so we just cooked it up like this. Marae are great for bottling and pickling. You've got your ringa wera, you've got all your chopping boards, all your materials, cooked it up like this, bottled it at that time, and then everyone can take away a jar of feijoa chutney, and you've also captured the mauri or the wairua of that hui and your home marae in that instant. So to me, that's another one of the reasons for bottling and pickling. It's you capture more than fruit and veggies in these jars. And at this time of year, you know, it's harvest time. Everyone's gardens, every gardener, their gardens are overflowing with kamokamo, with zucchini, with tomatoes, with all sorts of things. And I liken it to capturing the mauri of hini raumati. So all those fruit and veggies that have drawn on the energies of tamanui te rā, of hini raumati throughout the spring and summer, and then you capture it in these jars, and you have that mauri to sustain you throughout the months, throughout the coming months, that you know, we see less of hini raumati and right through into takurua. So in that way,
idea for gifts over Christmas and for birthdays. It's so thoughtful to give preserved kai. Great way to know your neighbours and your community.
Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely.
So much, Shirley.
Kei te pai. And community, you raised a good point about community. So like we moved to this whare about a year and a half ago, as I mentioned, and we didn't have, you know, we sort of have a smaller mara and so on here, limited fruit trees. So I've found what I've done is sort of throw it out to the hapori for any excess kai, and then bottle all of that up, make a jam or whatever, tākoha some back up, redistribute it around friends and whānau and community. And in that way, you're developing and strengthening that hapori connection.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shirley. Really appreciate your mātauranga and just sharing with us these beautiful tips and tricks. I always learn something new in these hui. So it's just really enjoyable to have this time with you all. I am just mindful that we've got 2 minutes till 12, so we're ready to close up. So Matt has just posted our survey link in the chat, and I would really appreciate it if you guys could just take a couple minutes to fill out that survey. There's only 3 questions on there, so it's really quick. And we just want to know, what did you enjoy and what would you like to see next from these hui? We really would appreciate to see you at our coming hui. As I mentioned, we've got 4 other learning bites in the process at the moment, and they cover different topics. So this one's been about serving. But we will cover other topics in the coming months, and I will select someone randomly from the list of survey respondents, and I'll get a little gift sent to you. So yeah, please fill that out, e te whānau, and it has just been such a joy to spend this last hour with you all. I hope that you've learned something, and I really appreciate the way that people have just activated in the chat, and they've responded to other people's questions, and people are offering to drop off kai, and all of this beautiful stuff's happening. So It's a really good reminder of what community looks like when we get together and decide to feed each other and learn from each other, and that our tupuna, you know, once we're gardeners, not once we're warriors, but once we're gardeners and still are gardeners. So tēnā tātou i te whānau. Do we have any comments or questions before I close us with karakia? No?
In terms of the koha following the survey, Arohanui, I can tā koha itahi. Like some of our actual chutney, send that through. So please fill in the survey. But yeah, as I mentioned, you'll capture the mauri of our wānanga this morning. Tēnā tātou, I've really enjoyed this. The time has flown and I've loved reading all your messages, which I'm reading on the side as they pop up. Lots of tips. Kia ora.
Rawe, thank you so much, Shirley, and thank you, Matt, as well. And thank you all for coming along today. We will actually post the recording on our website and on our YouTube channel, so feel free to send it to your whānau and friends, and keep an eye out on our socials and our pānui for the next coming webinar. Nō reira, me kati tātou I te karakia. E rua te wānanga kua kitea tō aroaro whenua e whera nei. Kia mau ai te mea tata hei pautoko mō mātou e manoko nei. Kia u, kia mau, kia tīna. Haumi e hui e, tai ki e. Mauri ora tātou, kia pai te toenga o te rā.
Ngā mihi kia koutou.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Please fill out that survey link.